Hello, and thank you so much for joining us for this month's Detect to Protect webinar. My name is Kim Schofield. I am from Stamus Networks, and I'll be moderating our session today. So I'll just go through some housekeeping items and also be handling the questions at the conclusion of the session. I am joined by Phil Owens this morning. He is our VP of Customer Solutions, and he's going to be presenting the information today. So just a few housekeeping items. So we are recording the session, and early next week, we will be sending out an email with a link to the recording, a copy of the slides, and some additional information for you. So keep an eye out in your inbox for that early next week. We're also going to hold questions until the conclusion of the session. So when we get towards the end, if you have any questions, please use the Q&A function to type those in, and we will take those when Phil finishes up. So I'm going to go ahead and turn things over to Phil.
Thanks, Kim. Appreciate the intro. I'm Phil Owens. I've talked with some of you that might be on that are customers. We do have a good global presence, I believe, from a participant perspective. So we'll be covering things around the world. But today, just real quickly, like to jump into an agenda, what it is that we're going to be looking at. We're going to do a quick intro to Stamus Networks right at the beginning. I know that these are typically not a Stamus specific type of presentation. These are more giving you some information about how NDRs and things can help you. So we will do a quick intro to Stamus Networks at the beginning, talk a little bit about how encryption is a double-edged sword, shifting the encrypted landscape, what's going on there, the challenges in monitoring encrypted data, and as well as what about decryption, how network detection and response can help, and the benefits of NDR and encrypted traffic monitoring, and then our actionable insights or summary of what we've talked about. And as Kim mentioned, we'll jump into a quick Q&A. So I will say that typically this is done at the end, and my marketing guy said, no, you have to do it at the beginning because Phil, you get a little bit too chatty and you might actually not get to it. So to appease him, we're going to do the quick intro right at the beginning, and then I promise we won't talk about Stamus the rest of the time. You might see some screenshots from our tool, but that's mainly because it is our tool. We can't screenshot some of our competitors. So just wanted to point that out. So quick intro. Stamus Networks was founded in 2014. For those of you that don't know, we are headquartered in the United States and Paris, France. We have a global team in over 7 countries. Clients include central banks, government certs, really large institutions, even market-leading cybersecurity vendors. All of that is covered with our client base. We are a 5+ year participant in lock shields and cross swords, which, by the way, the marketing guy that's made me do this, who would normally be on this call, is at Lock Shields right now. So the NATO CCDCOE Lock Shields event, which are some of the largest live fire cybersecurity events in the world. We are a world leader in Saracata-based network security. We are the creators of SELCS, for those that may know what that is, and we are recognized by Gartner in the market guide for NDR. Real quickly, the Stamus security platform is a NDR-based solution. It does IDS, network security monitoring, network detection and response, delivers actionable network visibility, and does high fidelity and transparent detections. Probably one of the key things that most of our customers really find interesting is we give complete transparency into what it is that we're detecting. We are open and extensible, and we can integrate in with most SIM, SOAR, EDR, IR ticketing systems. So the idea here is we know that a defense in-depth way of looking at things is how it's going to happen. All right, so from there, just a quick look at how we're deployed. We have Stamus network probes, which are deployed on the network, getting information, getting the traffic, doing deep packet inspection, getting the traffic from the network from a mirror port, spam port, something like that, so passively monitoring. And then we send all that data into the Stamus central server where it's actually located. All of this stuff can be done in AWS, GCP, Azure. All of the items here that you see are servers can be deployed in VMware, Nutanix, for those of you that don't like Broadcom anymore, and VMware, and as well as Proxmox, so hypervisors and hardware itself. The last thing I want to point out is, like I said, we know we are not the only part of your security piece. So we do integrate with SIMs and SOARs and IR ticketing systems. We can kick off playbooks in a SOAR. We can have direct APIs so that all data can be pulled and evidentiary data can be had. All right, so that's it. I promise from a sales perspective. So I got that out of the way. So let's hop into encryption landscape and the detection dilemma, right? So what we want to talk about here is that double-edged sword of encryption. The whole idea is that it enhances privacy and information security. You want to encrypt the data, scrambling the data using their different algorithms. But it's essential for protecting sensitive information such as financial data, personal information, and as an organization, your intellectual property. Encryption also plays a vital role in complying with data privacy regulations like GDPR and CCPA. So that's where encryption really, really soars. But the challenge for network defenders is once the data is encrypted, we no longer have great visibility into that data. So we need to balance the security and privacy with in this landscape. We must also, see through what's going on the encrypted side to be able to find any threats that are hiding in it. The shifting encrypted traffic landscape is just talking about the fact that over the last 10 years, we've now noticed from Google, they're mentioning that 95% of traffic is now encrypted on the web, right? And this comes from many technologists and advocates that are involved with Let's Encrypt, HTTPS Everywhere, certbot, all of those things that make it free to go ahead and encrypt your data, because before you used to have to pay a fee to a company in order to get public keys that you can utilize and private keys from something that is trusted. And now with these trusted environments, they've made this free. So everybody that's hosting a website now usually does that encrypted. I will also mention that its rise is more websites using it, but encrypted communications in the browsers, but as well as messaging apps like WhatsApp, Signal, Telegram are offering end-to-end encryption, making messages unreadable even by service providers. Businesses are also increasingly using encrypted tunnels to transfer data securely between locations and adopting cloud-based services that encrypt data at rest, as well as in transit. While Google reports 95% of all its services and what they're seeing, Firefox is reporting that 80% of web traffic is encrypted. That last 5 to 20% exists because some websites are just old and abandoned. A small percentage of websites are intentionally hosting their sites in HTTP. Some mobile ecosystems don't use HTTPS. So, the TLS side of things, and HTTPS may still be difficult to obtain for accessibility reasons. So with that, we did a quick look at some stats out there that are talking about if a company has an encryption strategy in place, and they've already applied this consistently across the entire enterprise, and we can see how that's risen since 2006 on this chart, where 62% of those surveyed actually already have some type of encryption strategy in place. And then you can see how that is going down of the companies that don't have that in place. So this could be, encryption at rest, encryption in transit, on the network itself and how they want to go about handling that. So some of the challenges in monitoring encrypted traffic, right, with the increased use of encryption, creates significant challenges. These challenges are typically from a security team perspective, being able to see the data because we can't see the content of the encrypted traffic. They are unable to identify potential threats that are hidden within. This makes it difficult to detect malware, data breaches, and other malicious activity. Additionally, decrypting the user traffic raises privacy concerns, and organizations need to balance that security with data privacy, and especially personal data privacy when we start talking about Europe and GDPR and things like that. The dilemma that we run into and the benefits that from a decryption. Now we're talking about decryption as opposed to encryption. So I want to just point out some of the dilemmas that you might run into if you decide, okay, well, I can't see any of this encrypted data, so now I want to do decryption on my network, and some of the things that you might run into. While the benefits of decryption gives you full visibility, right, and you're able to see the body of the messages and the sessions that are taking place within the network, both east, west, north, south. The other thing is that it allows for faster detection and response, again, because of that visibility. The decryption, however, comes with challenges, and those challenges really reside around privacy concerns, making sure that you're not decrypting data that might be considered personal. The other thing to keep in mind is compliance issues around that. So going back to the GDPR, so making sure you're only decrypting the things that you need to decrypt just adds overhead, and that overhead could be in the form of performance overhead. So those are some of the challenges from a decryption perspective that you might face, right? Just oops. So the next thing that I want to talk about here is how NDR will address this. Now I'm talking about NDR in general. So how it will address these types of issues. So going from the decryption dilemma, right? Network detection and response can analyze network traffic to illuminate anonymous activity, or excuse me, anomalous activity, not anonymous, anomalous. So network detection and response is a powerful tool that can help organizations regain that advantage in monitoring encrypted traffic. NDR solutions analyze the network traffic for anomalies and suspicious behavior. Even within encrypted data streams, they leverage advanced techniques like machine learning and behavior analytics to identify potential threats. It actually, again, can provide real-time and high-fidelity threat detection. Some of the things to keep in mind as well is if you're utilizing a threat intelligence platform, most of that threat intelligence is based on the fact that they know the encryption is taking place. So the data that is provided by an NDR can be utilized for that specific purpose. But the key here is being able to see things that may have never been seen before on the network, or where a machine is doing something that it probably shouldn't be, and or communicating someplace that it's never communicated, or that it never communicates with so much data. Looking for scanning within a network, things like that can still be done even if the data is encrypted itself. So that allows us to identify the threats that might be in encrypted data, and utilizing those advanced techniques like machine learning and behavior analytics to help with actually detecting things. So some of the powerful non-decryption mechanisms. So some of the things that can be used by an NDR in order to actually be of value from a network perspective, even if the data is encrypted. So we have lots of TLS metadata, typically handled from a handshake that's taking place. We have JA3s and JA4s. The slide showing JA4s, mainly because JA3 itself has kind of been classified as obsolete after some randomization takes place in the headers of those transactions caused JA3 to not work properly. So making the move to JA4 for client and server fingerprints. Host behavioral anomalies. So this again goes back to the fact of finding a baseline of your host, right? So the bottom line is, for all of you that are on here, most of you are definitely defenders. I would assume, meaning you're defending your network. And one of the greatest things that you can have in your, the greatest tool that you have against the adversary is the knowledge of your own network. And by being able to see behavioral anomalies happening, where a server is communicating someplace that it's not supposed to, or it's communicating in a different mechanism to the places where it normally would do that. So looking at some of those behaviors. Being able to see command and control beacons, as well as identifying cipher suites. This can help with regards to policy violations. Maybe you have a certain policy that says certain ciphers aren't allowed, and now all of a sudden you're seeing a cipher that is different from that. So I'm going to dive into each one of these a little bit so that we can talk about it, just to give you an idea that even if we can't decrypt the data, what we can actually see on the network. So what you're looking at here is some of the TLS metadata. And again, this data is, the screenshots are from the Stamus security platform, but this could be any NDR, some of the data that is available for TLS. So what is it? This metadata is typically extracted from the handshake that's taking place at the TLS, determining what algorithms to utilize in that handshake, and then why it matters. Yeah, but used by threat intel providers will use this type of intelligence to be able to identify known threats. They may utilize any pieces of these metadata to do that identification, whether or not that's a service name indicator or an SNI or fingerprint or certificate information can be used to identify even known threats. And then it can be used for spotting anomalous activity. So the TLS data can be used to see potential beaconing that's happening on the network, which I'll talk a little bit more about in just a minute. So utilizing this data for spotting anomalous and behavior capabilities, right? So going back to the fact that if I see a machine doing something that it shouldn't be, even if it's encrypted, we have data to be able to see possibly where or what information is what from a handshake perspective is taking place. So we're actually seeing the data happen. JA4, JA4S, the NDRs also use JA3 and JA3S. Both of them are unique fingerprints that are derived from the hashes as a hash, right, of that TLS handshake metadata. There's a whole document written up on what pieces of data are used. But one of the things that are very interesting about the JA series of fingerprints, JA3 and JA4, is the fact that it doesn't rely on an IP address. So this can help and detect and identify C2 communication, command and control communication, mainly even if that command and control is moving from server to server, which a lot of times it will. The JA4 a lot of times will stay the same based off of the information that's used to generate that hash. The hash itself can stay the same across multiple IP addresses. So threat intelligence can actually use this as a malware fingerprint, especially the JA4S piece. The next one I want to talk about is host behavior and traffic anomalies. So what is it? Never before seen host or users on the network. Things like conceivably never before seen a JA4 hashes, never before seen user agents, things like that from a host behavior perspective. And it allows for identifying anomalous host behavior that deviates from the established baseline. So why does it matter? These deviations can help trigger investigations. If I see that my SQL Server or my domain controller is doing some communication that it's never done before, or doing some communication differently than it has in the past, that might be something worth heading over and doing that quick investigation on. It generates insights right into the changes of the network. So just keeping that in mind, if there's changes that are happening between machines, you're able to spot those. And the idea of spotting potential malware through behavior and traffic anomalies. I mentioned command and control beacons and how these come into play. It's utilizing that TLS metadata that can help out with. And what is a command and control beacon? It's periodic messages by malware. But let me be honest with you, command and control beacons, while that's typically malware, I would say beacons as a whole may pop up in certain instances for tools, and those are things that happen all the time. But really, utilizing this to help in an investigation. But basically, it's sending out typically small pieces of information periodically. I will also mention that a good detection for command and control beacons doesn't rely on the fact that it happens every 30 seconds or every 5 minutes or every 10 minutes, but that it's happening periodically over a period of time, right? So a lot of times this is actually handled by machine learning algorithms as opposed to some type of signature or direct algorithm. And most of the time, this is utilized with the TLS fingerprints like JA4 and being able to see that data. This, as mentioned before, why it matters, it helps identify suspicious command and control centers, and it used by malware to enable early detection, right? So if I'm seeing some command and control, I might or seeing some beaconing activity taking place on a system that I don't suspect it. Again, going back to the fact that this could be anomalous type of activity happening on a machine through some of the machine learning before. I'm able to take that data and go, okay, so what is this from an investigative perspective? The idea of identifying a cipher suite, basically what this does is it allows you determine the encryption algorithms that are used in the network session and during the TLS handshake. So getting that list of cipher suites can be very interesting. Maybe there's a certain cipher suite from a policy perspective that you want to utilize, and you want your entire network to actually be on. If you're seeing cipher suites that don't comply with that, that could be very interesting from an investigative perspective. And again, why it matters is comparing those cipher suites to industry standards like ANSI, for instance, can help determine if things are at the security level that you would like them to be at. Are they secure cipher suites? Are they insecure? Are they recommended? Are they degraded? Just to keep in mind from an organizational policy perspective, as well as using it during that investigation. So then we have some alternatives. So now I've gone through basically all of the things that we can do from an encrypted perspective and the data that we're able to see and utilize maybe more than you might have expected on encrypted traffic. The next thing I want to talk about just real quickly is the idea of decryption. So we have a couple of ideas from a decryption perspective, external decryption, and giving you some pros and cons of why this is interesting. Some of the pros again, if I'm decrypting the data, it does in fact give me a lot more visibility so that I can see the body of the message. If there is command and control traffic that is taking place, I can actually see what's being sent and received in that command and control. So when I'm doing the investigation, it gives me a lot of really cool information, I'll be honest with you, when I look at it. And then the idea of if it's decrypted and there are files being transferred, I'm able to pull those files out of those sessions. So doing file extraction for further analysis. There is an added infrastructure cost as well as a new hop in the network, because in order to do decryption today, especially with TLS 1.3, you have to be in line to make that decryption happen. TLS 1.2 and 1.1 allowed you to actually do it out of band, but 1.3 does require an endpoint to break that connection. So the decryption appliance would sit in between would sit on the network as a hop on the network. The data going through it will get decrypted. There's a couple of things to keep in mind from that perspective. While a lot of the decryption appliances can actually let you do filters and look for certain things like SNIs or things in those handshakes that we talked about before, and don't decrypt, especially for those European folks that are under GDPR and have specific privacy concerns. If my employee is going to their bank account, I don't want to decrypt that data, right? It's just an added configuration that has to be handled, and it needs to stay updated on a pretty regular basis. So the other part of that is if you're decrypting all your data, you run the risk that if a hacker does get in, now they could have access to your data in a decrypted form. And that becomes something to keep in mind as well from a decryption perspective. And again, I've already talked a little bit about the privacy issues, especially on personal data that is getting decrypted. So this is one form of decryption that can be done. There are some other forms, or one other form that I know of off the top of my head, and that is built-in or endpoint decryption. Again, for TLS 1.3, you do have to be an endpoint for that decrypted or encrypted tunnel in order to decrypt it. So sometimes you might get an agent that you deploy. So again, most of the pros are very similar, right? Full visibility into the network traffic, identification of malware. By utilizing that, the whole idea of being able to do further analysis. One of the key differentiators here from an endpoint detection is that there's no network breakpoint, right? There's no hop in line that if that goes down, now the network is having a problem. There is a problem that if the agent breaks, that network could be broken on that machine, but it only affects the machine the agent is running on. So a little less impact from that perspective. But it does require an agent, right, that is deployed or managed, and that adds overhead, especially if you're doing decryption of all the network traffic on that machine. Decryption is not a simple task, so it does actually add overhead from a resources perspective on the workstation or server where it's actually deployed. Many devices cannot have agents, right? So the whole idea of deploying an agent to things like hospital OT items that could be running embedded Windows or locations just where network infrastructure, for instance. I noticed that there was just a vulnerability that had been discovered that has been exercised recently on some TP-Link servers that were unpatched, or actually the patch came out later. So it was a 0-day when it first got impacted, and you can't put an agent on those. So having the network data is really the only way to do stuff. But you also, from a decryption perspective, you wouldn't be able to put a decryption agent on those types of appliances. Right. And then there's network topology considerations for the added traffic that would be coming out of If you're decrypting everything on every endpoint, then that endpoint now is sending twice the amount of data. So just handling that topology change could be a rough thing from a network design perspective. So the benefits that we've talked about here for using NDR on encrypted traffic is the enhanced threat visibility. Absolutely. So with all of the data, hopefully you learned a little bit here that we can capture a lot of data that can be used for threat visibility, even without decrypting that data. It helps us improve the security posture as well as give for really good detection and response times. So the last thing that I want to talk about here from a key takeaway and actionable insights on this particular presentation is the fact that encryption presents a double-edged sword. We talked about that. It protects data, but creates blind spots for the security teams as they cannot see the content of the encrypted traffic, right? The use of encryption is on the rise, has been for a number of years. Just a little anecdote. I've been to a number of RSA conferences where I've actually worked in the SOC of those conferences, and I'm in the United States, if you hadn't guessed by my accent, and the RSA conference in the United States back in 2018 probably was about 65% encrypted was the data that we saw running across that network. But in Singapore, the same year, that was 85% encrypted. So just really, we've been seeing this happen over time, especially with the advent of the ability to encrypt websites and things like that at no cost. Encryption. The next piece is encrypted traffic definitely creates challenges for monitoring threats, and security teams will struggle to identify stuff, but we do have a lot of data to be able to see that from an NDR perspective. And I'm not talking about just the Stamus security platform, but any NDR does produce a lot of data around that. And again, with anomaly detection and things like that, you're able to circumvent a lot of that struggle. Decrypting the traffic offers advantages, but comes with the drawbacks, right? Decryption improves visibility, but raises those privacy concerns, compliance issues, and can impact network performance. And then finally, network detection response can provide real-time threat detection and response capabilities, even for encrypted traffic, by analyzing network data for anomalies and suspicious behavior. Especially around that anomalous activity and suspicious behavior, utilizing the data that we're able to pull from that encrypted session. You will also notice, I didn't mention this in the slides, but I do want to bring this up. You will notice that most network detection and response tools do not offer much from a decryption perspective, or they offer one of the things that we talked about before, decryption at the endpoint. One of the reasons for that is they're typically not sitting in line, they're sitting passively on the network. So they would end up having to sit in line. And secondly, the overhead to go along with being able to detect threats and do the decryption becomes a bit much. The cost benefit becomes a little bit less of a value if the solution is doing both decryption and actually doing the detection logic. So what I mean by that is you may have a 10 gig link on your network, and in order to do that, you may need multiple sensor boxes that are doing decryption and censoring the network in order to be able to accomplish that. Whereas if we're just looking at the network as an NDR, that can be done on a single box with no problem at all. Finally, I want to jump into additional resources, some of the things that are available to you. As Kim said, at the end of this presentation, we are going to provide these slides to everyone here, as well as the folks that are registered. So all of that's going to happen. We do have a lost in the noise, right? 4 weak attack signals that your IDS might miss. So we have a PDF there. You'll be able to reach. Since you'll have this slide deck, you will have these links that are below. The 6 essential requirements that you might look at from a network detection and response perspective, and then an idea. We actually partner. Stamus Security Platform and Stamus Networks partners with Mira Security for doing some decryption. So we have a brief on that as well. I'm going to put up a next slide. It has a couple of QR codes on it that if you'd like to scan them, one of them will take you to our resource library where you have links to white papers, videos, tech briefs. So you can get that right now. Again, the slides will be coming, so you can get it from there. And then finally, we have well over 200 plus blog articles that are being written almost daily, at least weekly. I think we're putting something out on network security topics. So keep an eye on that space. There's lots of good information there. And it's just network security topics. So from there, I want to hit the Q&A section and ask if there's anything out there. So, hey, Kim, welcome back. Don't know if anything has popped up since
Thank
I've
you.
been talking.
Yeah, we don't have anything that's popped up yet, but we did ask folks to wait until the end. So if you have any questions, we're happy to take them. And again, just type those into the Q&A, which is located at the bottom of your screen. So I'll give everybody a little bit of time to ask those questions if you'd like to. You can also use the chat function if you're more comfortable with that. And Phil did mention, but I'll just remind folks that the email that will be sent out early next week will include the recording and the slides and then links to some specific information.
Yeah, and if we're waiting on some questions there, Kim, one other thing that I'd like to say is that Kim and I will be at RSA conference in a couple of weeks. So if any of you are joining out there, you can come by at the booth and say hi. We would love to see you and hear from you. So we will be at RSA conference in San Francisco. I believe it starts on May 6th.
It does.
So just a couple weeks.
Yes, we're in booth 2357. That's in the South Hall, if folks have been there before. All right. Well, I am not seeing any questions. Oh, I spoke too soon. All right. So one of the questions that we have that just came up is there something specific built in within SSP that can inspect encrypted traffic?
So if you're asking if we do decryption, I think I kind of mentioned that from an SSP perspective, and the answer is no, we don't do decryption built in. We do partner with Mira Security, which is one of those pieces of data that I said that will be available to you, and you'll have the link for that. Mainly because of the performance overhead that's required for doing decryption. Now, is there something built in as far as detecting encrypted traffic? Absolutely. We have some machine learning algorithms that are detecting beaconing activity that is specific around TLS traffic. We also have other algorithms and even rules and other things that are utilized for anomalous activity. So some algorithms from an anomalous perspective is have we ever seen this JA4 before? Have we ever seen this this TLS SNI before on the network? And being able to populate information around that. There are some other items that are also in the solution that are specific around looking, again, going back to that metadata that we talked about and all the different pieces of metadata that are available or that can be derived from what's on the in the traffic. So for instance, something that I didn't mention is that while the metadata is available to to see SNI and fingerprint certificate fingerprints and DNs and all of those things. Some of that data can also be derived, and Stamus Security Platform, for instance, is deriving the the cipher suite that is being utilized on a TLS session. So that's getting derived and then getting compared with currently we're using ANSI to see, is this cipher suite secure? Is it insecure? Is it degraded? So just some of the data that's available, where I find that a lot of my customers will not actually deploy a decryptor, mainly because of especially in Europe, mainly because of the overhead needed to maintain it for GDPR purposes and making sure that things are private on the network. Cool.
Great, thanks. All right, so we have another question, kind of talking a little bit more about SELC. So they want to know, is there a TLS metadata anomalies pointing to malware in a standard SELC signature package?
So the standard SELC signature package would include ET open, and there definitely are a number of TLS type of rules signatures that are available in that SELCS package. I will tell you that some of the derived data that we were just talking about, that I just talked about, with regards to cipher suites and those types of things, that is not available within SELCS. That's stuff that we are actually doing in our commercial tool, as far as adding telemetry data, as well as adding additional value to the data coming out of Suricata. That's what we would call a post-processing, which is not SELCS. SELCS is plain Suricata out of the box and giving you a complete turnkey solution there for a single probe. But there are in ET Open some rules or signatures that are definitely TLS specific and encryption specific.
All right, good. Thanks, Phil. All right, I do not see any other questions. So unless somebody pops in the next couple of seconds, I think we will conclude the webinar. I thank everyone again for joining us, for taking the time out of your day to come and hear about this topic. I did have one more thing that popped up that they said thank you and goodbye.
Thank you. Thanks,
so
everyone.
It's very nice. Yeah. So thank you so much. Thanks to everyone who joined us, and keep an eye out in your inbox for that information early next week. Oh, wait a minute. One more.
It's just a thanks.
Oh, just a thanks. Okay. All right, guys. So thank you so much for joining us.